Welcome to this week, and what a week it has been. There have been just so many top stories to choose from as we had a week where Elon Musk tried to buy Twitter, and of course, the Bank of Canada hiked their interest rate by 0.5%. I did, I did seriously think about doing a show about Elon, and that would probably be a really entertaining show because Elon is such a fascinating person. However, the Bank of Canada is kind of more important. And I think as investors, it certainly affects us a lot more than Elon does. Though Elon would have been more fun. I will definitely say that. Anyway, the Bank of Canada and their interest rates hike this week. That's what got our nod. So that's kind of our topic here tonight. It should be a good show. I've got a little bit of information for you guys. And as always, we've also got chat. So feel free to throw questions in, comments, salutations, all of that fun stuff. All right. So I'm pretty sure that you've all heard that the Bank of Canada, they're looking to aggressively, they're looking at aggressive rate hikes. And the whole reason for this is they're basically looking to combat inflation. Now, last Wednesday, we did have a 0.5-point rise, and they are telling us that they're looking to actually increase it further. The next meeting is in June. So in June, we're looking at another rate hike. I wouldn't be surprised if we get another half because they really, really, really want to get inflation under control. And honestly, inflation is definitely, there's no doubt that inflation is out of control. It's kind of weird. It's like you could go into a store today and buy something for $10, return to the store tomorrow, and it'll be $15. It's almost as if the entire world has been on sale through the illness, and that sale has just ended. Now we're all back to regular price. Unfortunately, though, it's going to keep going up, so it's worse than that. All right, now before I jump a little further in, I just want to quickly say hi to Bleak. Hey, Bleak. And we got the friggin' Oracle. Hell yeah, I'm a fan of Elon, I assume. And we got Jill. Hi, Jill. And Riley. Hey, Riley. Awesome. It's good to see you all here tonight. Oh, and of course, Dave D. Hi, Dave. It's always good to see Dave. All right. And Bonnie. Hey, Bonnie. It's good to see Bonnie as well. Now, before I jump into the rest of this information, I want to just point out, if you guys remember last week, any of you who were here last week, I was talking about how great it would be to get that, that 500 subscribers. And well, yeah, we've hit the 500. We're like at about 585 or 586. So we're moving on the 600 mark now. So we had a big influx of people this week. Hopefully some of those people are going to show up here on the live stream tonight. That would be completely awesome. But so we'll have the community tab very, very soon. From what I've heard, once you hit 500, they normally add it within a few days or so. Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you. I appreciate that. So I'm looking forward to it. ETH Docs just launched. Load up bags. Moving on up. Yes, I am trying to move up. Absolutely. All right. So here's this big question. And I saw that the other day, I saw one of my cousins was reporting, doing their Facebook thing. And they were like, they said the Bank of Canada raised the interest rates to fight inflation. How does that happen? So we're going to talk a little bit about the whole process. So I guess the question that we have is, how exactly does raising the interest rate combat inflation? And we're going to get to that momentarily. I think first it's a better idea just to get a general idea of what happens when the Bank of Canada raises their rates. So what happens is the rate that they raised, it's their key policy rate. It's also known as well as the overnight rate. This is the interest rate that the Bank of Canada wants the other banks to charge each other when they lend money to each other. So banks, of course, are, if you've ever heard of fractional reserve, it's the way the banks sort of lend each other money and then they inflate it into more money than we really have. Well, the interest that's on that, that's the overnight rate. So with that overnight rate, it's used by the regular banks when they figure out what interest they'll be charging their customers for lending or depositing money. So when that rate goes higher, then they will charge you what's called a prime rate. So the prime rate is, well, first of all, right now, the overnight rate is now sitting at 1%. It was at 0.25%. Then they raised it initially 0.25 up to 0.5, and then they added 0.5 last week. Well, this week now. This week, sort of last week, and that takes it up to 1%. So right now, the overnight rate is currently sitting at 1%. Now, the banks, of course, are not going to pass on that 1% to you. No way. They're going to make their piece of the pie. So they're going to be charging you, if you have perfect credit, you'll be lucky to get about 3.2%. That's the prime rate. The worse your credit rating is, the higher they'll charge you, though. So unless you've got a perfect credit rating, it's going to be very few people who will actually get a loan at 3.2%. So that kind of sucks. And I know the friggin' Oracle is saying, yes, if the rate is up, let's pull it up here. Yes, if rate is high, food costs go down. Okay, well, yeah, it's kind of interesting what happens when the interest rate goes up. And we're going to talk about that here in a moment. So obviously, when they raise up their rates, it means that anybody who's getting loans from the banks are going to be paying more interest. Simple as that. When your mortgage comes up for renewal, if you got a nice rate during the illness, you're going to end up paying more. It's as simple as that. But here's one of the things that people don't seem to remember is that the actual overnight rate was up around 2% before the illness. So we're still paying a lot less right now. And I imagine they'll be aggressive to get us all the way back up to 2%. But how exactly? I just don't like interest rates, but they're a necessary evil. So I did say that I would explain a little bit more about the interest rates. So in general, when you raise an interest rate, it of course makes lending a lot harder. So you're looking at everything from mortgages, business loans, personal loans, and of course your credit cards. Those are all going to cost you a lot more to use. And of course, as people and businesses are paying more interest, it reduces what they are able to spend. And what this translates into is basically a lower demand for products because people can't spend as much, so they can't buy as much, if that makes sense. And this will have a huge impact on something that is called demand pull inflation. All right. This is going to get a little bit complicated, but it's not that bad. There's two main types of inflation. You've got demand pull and you've got cost push. So demand pull inflation, and Jill says inflation has multiple variables. Yeah, absolutely. Inflation is not a simple thing. Okay, with demand pull, what is happening in that situation is that you've got an inflation that's resulting from an increase in the demand for goods. So when you have a demand for an output, when you have a demand for goods that exceeds the actual output of the good, so the demand is bigger than the supply, then you get into a situation where people are bidding up that price. So suppliers are like saying, oh, well, you're going to pay me $5 a piece, but this guy over here is going to pay me $6. Oh, you'll pay me $7? Wonderful, you got a deal. That's kind of what this type of inflation does. And what was Jill saying? Sorry, I meant are a factor, but not the only factor. Yeah, there's a lot of different factors. So that's what's happening with the demand pull. And this causes private lenders to spike mortgage lends. Oh, will this cause private lenders to spike? They probably, I would say yes, because when you increase your interest rate at the banks, it filters all the way down. because you got to take a look at private lenders. They are also, they're also indebted to the bank in one way or another, and their rates are going to go up. Everything always gets passed down. When there's crap that starts at the top of a hill and gets pushed down, everybody on the way down gets it. Unfortunately, the people at the bottom tend to get it the worst because, it just sort of builds up on its way down. So that's not the best thing. All right. So as I mentioned, with a demand pull, you've got a situation where you just don't have enough. Now, I'll tell you the perfect example of this. If you remember in the beginning of the illness, everybody decided, I'm going to build a deck. I'm going to, and Mr. Red Taco says crap rolls downhill. It sure does. But at the beginning of the illness, everybody wanted to buy a deck. Everybody wanted to do those home repairs because, everybody was locked at home. There's nothing better to do. And what happened? All of a sudden, lumber became absolutely scarce, and that drove the price of lumber up. So that there was an example of a demand pull, because that was demand pull inflation. There was a huge demand. There wasn't enough for it. People could charge a lot more for it for that reason. Now, the nice thing about a demand pull inflation is that once that demand goes away, that inflation should come back down. And that's kind of the whole idea about raising the interest rates. When you raise the interest rates, you end up, because people can't afford it, you end up lowering that demand. So demand pull inflation, as a result, will start to come down. But then demand pull has a brother or a sister. And that's called cost push inflation. Cost push inflation is another beast all on its own. So basically with this one here, what happens is the actual price of producing goods is going to increase due to a whole bunch of different factors. And usually it's because of shortage of parts, of labor, capital, or land. And we kind of have a lot of this going on. Like when we talk about the labor shortage, when people can't get enough people in there to make the widgets on the line, well, what ends up happening is that company still wants their profits. Just because they don't have enough people, they're not going to sort of sit back and say, oh, well, I guess I just won't take my profits today. No, what they do is they raise the prices. They raise the prices because they need to still make their profits, and that is your cost, and that is your cost push inflation. So what we're seeing is, first of all, the supply chain. The supply chain is causing a ton of this, and the big thing with the supply chain is that the supply chain is causing, well, it's causing both types, but when you can't get parts, for example, and you're having difficulty getting parts to put into the products you're making, that is part of cost push, and that will push your price up. So it's kind of that whole thing that happens when we're dealing with the different types of inflation. So it kind of gets bad. And then, of course, the whole workers not working. It's like, what are these workers doing? I mean, some of them have found other jobs. A lot of them have decided, they call it the Great Resignation. There's a lot of people who have had very unhappy jobs, and they thought there was no other way. And then being off work for so long, they've come to discover that there's better things in life than doing a job that you hate for day after day. So it's kind of one of those interesting things. And now Jill here says, the issue with our current situation is that supply side is the larger issue. Capital becomes more expensive because of the interest rate. Labor cost usually is not an immediate, it's a long-term cost. And that's kind of where I'm going with this, is that raising the interest rate is going to help one side of inflation, but the side that's being done by labor shortages, by supply chain issues, the interest rate's not going to help that part. So instead of inflation going out of control, it might just be going slightly out of control. that's kind of what this the jump in interest rate is going to do. I mean, we still need. I would rather have it slightly out of control than completely out of control. So there is that. But if you're a person who is, if you're looking to buy a house, if you're looking to, take out a big loan, maybe start a business, these are the people who are going to really get hurt by the extra interest rates. But keep in mind, and this is what I keep going back to, these rates are still lower than they were before the illness. And people coped perfectly fine before then with these rates. So you take June, like right now we have our overnight rate at 1%. I wouldn't be surprised if they came in with another half, take it up to 1.5 in June. I would not be surprised. But then again, it really depends if it's going to be that unpopular, maybe they'll come in with a half. But my gut says that it'll be another. They'll come in with a quarter. My gut says it's going to be a half again in June. But we'll have to see what that looks like when we get to June. So it's kind of one of these things. Right now, if you have debt on a credit card, this is an ideal time to be looking at trying to knock some of that down, because these, the credit card, their rates are going to start going up. This, like I said, and as Mr. Red Taco said, crap rolls down the hill. And, if anybody likes to give crap, it's probably the credit card companies. They're very, very good at it for sure. So that's kind of inflation in a nutshell. It's kind of what's happening with this bank rate hike. The inflation itself, there's no real end in sight to this. I don't see an easy way out of the supply chain issue. You've got China, where a lot of stuff is coming out of, and they've got lockdowns still. So there's definitely disruption right across the board. And we're heading into the summer months. If we get another summer like last summer and some of the stuff that we had, especially some of the stuff in BC between the fires and and all of the what was it, landslides and all of that crap that was happening with the water and the floods, that would just be absolutely devastating. So I definitely wouldn't want to see that. Now, Ken says if we changed our borrowing practices, we could screw the banks. Well, absolutely. That's one of those things. There are alternatives to the banks. There is lending in crypto. So that's an option. I don't know if I'm 100% comfortable yet with it because it's so brand new. But, there are different ways out there. There are different things that you can do. Now, Jill was saying the third component, land, is one that is interesting, though. The cost of land has gone up, and that increases the interest rate. And that increasing the interest rate should help cool the housing land market, whether that will happen. Yeah, well, with land and with the cost of houses, what the thought is what they were hoping is that if people can't deal with all of this interest, so a lot of the people who are trying to take advantage of the housing market are trying to do it because right now with very, very small interest rates, they can get in and they can sort of flip houses. They're not really thinking about the long term. So what increasing the rate is if all of a sudden these rates start going up, you need more money for a down payment. You're going to be paying more money on your mortgage. So that's going to hopefully, at least the bank is thinking, hopefully that would cool off the market a little bit. So people would be sort of going, I think I'm going to hold off on buying a house because I don't want to be paying a huge amount of interest on it because it's just absolutely out of control. So that to me is kind of one of those things that it's just, will it work? And that's the whole thing. Is this going to work? I honestly don't know. We won't really know until we have a chance to sort of see what happens. But it's just funny. I got distracted for a second. Every night, my computer, it switches over to night mode. So everything sort of flashes and changes different colors. And it's just like, so it's just kind of weirdness. Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of different things that are going on. And we really kind of are in new territory, because one of the interesting things too is we don't know yet exactly how effective this whole, cost push is going to be. That's not clear yet at this point. But we have some other interesting things too. One of the other really interesting things too is what's going to happen to our investments when you increase the interest rate. Now, normally you would think, now we'll use logic first. So logic to me says that if we increase the interest rates, people have less money to spend. Therefore, they have less money to invest. So if companies are not getting in the money that they normally are through regular investors, you would expect that to have an impact on the market. You'd expect to see the market, sort of correct a little bit to sort of make up, to get used to a lower interest rate. However, here's the really ironic thing about this. That hasn't happened in the past. Even though all logic says the market should go down when interest rates go up, in the past, the market has actually done fairly well during times when interest rates have been rising. So it's interesting. Now, we have a very unique situation right now because of the illness and the situation that we've been through. People are at record debt. There is a lot of debt. It's almost like a perfect storm in many ways. So we don't, even though logic says, the market should be impacted, the market should go down, history says, nah, it's not going to be a big deal. Don't worry about it. But what is going to happen? That's a good question. Will the market go down? Will it not go down? Will crypto finally, especially Bitcoin, is Bitcoin going to sort of stay tethered to the S&P? Like lately, it's been very close, matching it almost move for move, which is interesting because one of the whole ideas of decentralization in crypto is to sort of move us away from that. But the problem is, and this is a lot of the early investors into Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is still very, very early. A lot of those people who are investing in Bitcoin also do invest in the market. So I think there's that correlation until we get a lot of, I don't want to say retail, but more or less when we start getting in the bigger investors, when you start getting businesses that come in and start putting it on their balance sheet, then I think we're going to start to see it move a little bit further away from the S&P. So that way there it won't be tied to it so much. But it's hard to say what's going to happen. It's kind of one of them really interesting things. And I don't have an answer yet for that, but it'll be fun to watch, I think. I also think it's a situation where if things start to look a little bit shaky, that's when you want to start thinking about maybe moving a few things out of your riskier stocks and start thinking about your blue chip stocks. Blue chip is definitely good when times get really bad. Now, here's the other thing too, is recession. There's been a lot of indication that a recession is on the horizon. So that's coming, whether we like that or not. So it's one of those things. I know that there's a lot of people who are a little freaked, and there are people who are, for example, starting to move things into cash so that they've got a supply to be able to start taking advantage of buying when we fall into that recession. But at the same time, it's one of these situations where that money that's sitting in cash waiting for a recession is not making you anything. It's simply losing value because of deflation, of course. Because of inflation, not deflation. Duh. So yeah, it's losing you money. It's sitting there. It's nice to have a nice nest egg, of course, if that recession does come. And the funny thing is we really never, a lot of times people don't realize that our inflation has begun until after the inflation has already begun. The recession has already begun. I was reading what Mr. Taco said as I was trying to talk at the same time. Hasn't there been skyrocketing inflation in the past, or inflation mixed in with logistics, less product, etc.? There's definitely been high inflation, but there's nothing sort of at this at the rate that we have it right now. In many ways, you could say we're in uncharted water, but that's what kind of makes it interesting too, because it gives us that opportunity, like, to sort of try to figure out, well, what's going to happen. It's in a situation too, like even the Bank of Canada, when they came out this week, they were like saying, yeah, we thought it was transitory. It's not, we're wrong. So we're going to get aggressive. So that's kind of that thing. Nobody kind of knows exactly what's going to happen, but people are making some educated guesses and they're taking some action. And taking some action is probably better than just sort of sitting back and just letting whatever happen. So if this helps a little bit, then that's great. But I don't really think we can stop a recession from coming. I think one will. Well, I mean, a recession is a normal part of the whole cycle. When you look at the business cycle, you have to go through your peaks and your valleys. So recessions have to come. And we will have, we will have a recession, and we will have another recession and another. It just comes down to how bad will this recession be, and a lot of that's going to be, how are we going to sort of recover everything that's been going on, everything from our supply chain to the shortage of workers. So these are all things that are coming together, and we have to figure out a way to sort of figure that, to fill the gap. When it comes to the workers, if the people don't want to work, the people don't want to work. We're going to have to either look at advancing some of the robotics. Elon Musk has robots. See, we should have been talking about Elon, then we could have just moved into this topic right away. So it'll be interesting, I think. Let's see. Mr. Red Taco says, I guess with this rate, no one having it happen before, you can't plan for something you didn't see coming. Well, that's true. I mean, that's a whole, you guys have heard me talk about black swan events. Well, a black swan event is those events that nobody sees coming. Like, like the illness. People thought that it was coming. There was, conspiracy people really were the only ones saying, yeah, this is going to happen to us one of these days. And sure enough, it did. And some people, myself, probably I would say early January, I started to figure out that that's when stuff was getting a little bit out of control, and I was sort of watching it. Now, keep in mind, I do have a background in biology, chemistry. I've taken microbiology, and I kind of understand the whole cycle and the way these things work. So I was like, yeah, I can see this getting out of control really fast. So when by the time we got to March, and they declared it an official illness, I was like, yeah, I'm not surprised that this was happening. Interestingly enough, I was working at a crap job at the time. I'm in a print shop. And it was one of these things, Nova Scotia, there just wasn't very many jobs. So I knew that if they were going to start doing lockdowns, I needed to maneuver myself so that I wouldn't have to return to the print shop. So before it was declared an illness, I got myself onto a leave of absence. That way there, I found a loophole that I was able to use. So that way there, I didn't have to go back to the print shop. And I'm sure a lot of people probably used loopholes or just didn't care. It's just one of those funny things that I think happened. My poor mom, I think my mom was kind of like thinking it was the end of the world all the time. And I was just like, no, it's just, it'll pass. And, and it's mostly, well, I wouldn't say it's mostly passed. So, right now, I know in Ontario, they're looking at, sort of a sixth visit from the illness that's moving around. So all it does take, and this is what I think a lot of people don't understand the whole idea of mutation, is that a simple mutation can come along, and if it's the right mutation for the illness, one that Right now, it doesn't need to make it any more contagious. What it would need to do is make it a little bit more virulent. But at this point, most chances are, most mutations that probably will hit our illness friend is probably just going to make it either a little bit more contagious but less virulent, which is good. But at the same time, and this is the whole thing, you take the common flu, if we got a serious enough mutation with just the common flu, that could turn into something interesting. So it's one of those things that you kind of have to sort of keep in mind. The best bet is usually when you're dealing with viruses is simply to keep your immune system in good shape. Like quite literally, if you've got a good immune system, you can probably do okay with a lot of different things. I know that I know a while back, my roommate at that time encountered the bird flu, and oh dear, she was like in bed for like a week. It hit her hard, and then I got it, and it was just more or less sniffles. I played games while I recovered for a couple of days. But it just comes down to a lot of it is just how the system that your immune system is in. And there's different ways that you can take care of your immune system. I'm not going to get too deep into that here, but that's just one of those things. But that's what the illness, the supply chain, that's another issue altogether. China needs to, I think China's at the point that they're so paranoid about the illness that they're going into this almost overreaction of lockdowns, and they've got to loosen that up a little bit. We're at the point now that the version of the virus that's out there is not very deadly, and we need to start getting these supply chains working. Now, you take it, even if China removed all their lockdowns tomorrow, sent everybody to work, you're still looking like you take the amount of time it takes for stuff to get from ships from China over to North America and then eventually through our system, you're looking at months. So right now, the stuff happening in China at this very moment, that is the stuff that we're going to see a couple months from now, because it takes time. You can't a big laden ship just doesn't move across the Atlantic or the Pacific, sorry. In this case, it's the Pacific. Doesn't move across the Pacific very fast. And yes, Jill was that person who had the bird flu. And you still have backlog. Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of one of those things. There's backlog. You still have, you've got ships that when they arrive to our side, can't even get into the port. They just basically sit out there waiting for their turns to get in. Now, if you've got perishables, if you're shipping perishables, that can be bad news. The worst thing is to have to wait forever to get into port and then basically load a bunch of containers of rotten food. But it's kind of that bad situation, and we're in that situation, and there's really no easy way out of it. And especially if the whole great resignation that's happening, at least in North America, if that's happening, well, I guess in China, the one saving grace to China is they won't give people that choice. But it's going to be a tough battle to get our ways out of this. It's going to be cool, I think. So I'm not looking forward to it too much. And Mr. Red Taco again says, yeah, coming across oceans, having to get it into port, having it travel to the warehouse, store, people buying the product, it's a domino effect. Well, it is, absolutely. It's, it's one of these long chains that you're at the end of the chain, and there's a lot of things that can happen along that chain that can disrupt the whole chain, including, particularly yourself. So that's never a good thing. Which is kind of weird. And that's the whole idea too. When you start to bring into climate change, because climate change definitely was responsible for all of the disruptions we had in BC. You had a situation, which is funny because normally our stuff comes into BC and then ships out to us. And then we had a situation where they couldn't get stuff, and then and we had to try to get stuff to them. And it just caused such a chaos. But what do you do? I mean, what do you really do in situations like that? But if you don't have people to move product on ship, ports, logistics, warehouse, stores, people move people. Yeah, it's true. Here's a thought. I don't know if this would be ethical or not. We get a lot of people in prisons, right? Why not have them, send them over to warehouses? Pay them, make their lives a little bit better in exchange for some work. But that's a group of people that aren't working that, you could pretty much say, you wouldn't even have to say, you wouldn't have to force them. You could just sort of even say to them, look, here's a little bit of extra freedom if you want to do this job. And, obviously we couldn't do that to everybody. I'm thinking of people who are, I would say, like, minimum and medium security, like the high security folk. Now you can't really do that with them. But that's a workforce, maybe. I don't know. That's just kind of a zany idea I have, but it'd be one of their ways to pay their debt to society. So, that might be an idea as well. And I think the other thing too is we really have to, I think this whole illness is teaching us that we have to stop relying on places like China. We need to start looking at being able to manufacture things in North America. And I'm not going to say in everything in Canada, but between Canada, the US, and Mexico, with some of the trade treaties we have, what we should even look at is perhaps creating our own version, of that economic manufacturing megalith that is, China and Taiwan and Hong Kong and, all these places where they're making everything. So let's do it in North America, then get that all flowing. I think it would be a really good idea. And Red Taco says, I don't think to do that in parts of the U.S. inmates are used to do road works. Yeah, I think they do some simple stuff with inmates in the U.S., but I'm thinking, you could there's nothing wrong. Like you could have like a shift at a factory. Like maybe one shift every day would be the inmate shift or something, if you don't want, to mix them with the regular crew. I think, because, the big thing with this is that you're basically giving these inmates a little bit of freedom. If you're sitting in a jail pretty much all the time and you have this opportunity to go out and actually work and, you're going to be given some money for it, your life's going to be better. Why wouldn't you want to do it, right? There might be some that are just lazy and say no, but I think a majority of them would jump on it. Let's see. China has been the end all be all to when it comes to products all over the world. It also come down to money. Companies went overseas for money, cheaper labor. Yeah, I know. And that's one of those things. That's one of the things that we have to get past, because it could just be that the only compromise is that people are going to have to pay a little bit more. But keep in mind too, because China is doing it for the world, we're talking about mass production at a very high level. So even though we think of how expensive it might be to do that here, if we did a deal with, the US and Mexico, and we're manufacturing all these things for all of North America, and maybe we could even loop some of South America in, and plus maybe even Europe might look at us as a possible place to get some of this stuff from as well. So we might be able to get the prices down. We may not be able to match China because, they do have very cheap labor. But, once again, we'll ask Elon Musk to get those robots ready so that we can get some cheap labor. So there's definitely different things that we can do. It's just whether we're willing to do it. And that's the whole thing, because society, and this is the whole thing, society is on the verge where I don't think we can ever go back to before the illness. Too many people are just, they've changed. Everybody's changed, I think. Let's go back to that great resignation. You've got a whole group of people who are basically saying, okay, I'm not going to do any crap stuff. And a lot of them are working for themselves. They found things that they can do online. Maybe they become YouTubers, maybe, or maybe they're just playing games on Twitch. We don't know, but they're doing stuff and they're making money. And some of them in the early part of the illness went and bought a whole bunch of cheap Bitcoin and made a little bit of money off of that too. So there's a lot of different ways that people have been finding to make money. And now we're at that point where it's kind of impacted the world. This whole great resignation thing. I mean, if somebody told you before the illness, oh yeah, we were going to have such a hard trouble filling jobs because everybody's just going to quit. You'd be like, nah, you're crazy. It's not going to happen. But it has. And, it doesn't seem to be even, and a lot of people too. And I think even the government were kind of fooled with this. I think they were thinking, well, okay, yeah, they're doing this right now because we're supporting them. We got all these supports in place. Well, let's remove the supports. And they have. The supports are gone in most cases. The only supports that are left, I think, are the sick, at least in Canada. If you're looking after somebody who's sick from COVID, that one there, so the sick benefit, and childcare. I mean, that's basically it. Everything else is, kaputs. Well, the lockdown one, the Canada worker lockdown is still on the books, but no place in Canada is in a lockdown, so nobody can actually claim it. So the supports are gone, but people are still not going back. And I think that's kind of one of those things that the government looks kind of like, huh? How are these people supporting themselves? What are they doing? In some cases, I don't know. Maybe either everybody was really good at saving or people have just found other ways to make money. And I think some people are probably become better with their money too. I imagine over the, if you look at this community, a lot of people in this community are fairly new to investing. What drove you to investing? Well, you had time to think about money. You had time to, be on YouTube half the day if you wanted to. You had time to, find this community and start learning about finances and start learning how to make your money work for you. So that's kind of an interesting thing that I think has really been transformative in society. But the question will be, is this all for a better purpose? Or is this all just one big, giant, holy banana bread type thing? That's what I say. Now, Mr. Red Taco says he finds it hard seeing wanted ads everywhere during an illness. It's a different world. Yeah. And here's the funny thing. I mean, right now, I think anybody can pretty much walk in off the street to a McDonald's if they want and get a job. Now, they don't pay you very much, obviously, but I think it's kind of one of those situations where all of these jobs where, people were asked to, well, I don't know if you guys have ever worked at like a McDonald's or a Burger King or fast food, but they work you to death. I remember as a teenager, it's like that word, oh, if you got time to lean, you got time to clean. And of course you have other words in the back of your head that you want to say to them, but you can't. It's just one of those things now, I've always found that kind of odd that the people who make the least amount of money are given the most grief at work. And I've always thought that was kind of one of those things. Like my thought is, hey, if you've got somebody who's willing to do a hard job for next to nothing, be grateful. Treat those people like gold because that's important. And if you've ever been in a place where, when I used to work, no swear words rhyme with lean. Okay, that's true, Mr. Red Taco. But here was an interesting thing. I used to in Calgary, I was the leisure manager in one of the superstores. So one of my biggest banes was the fact that at that time, jobs were plentiful. And I had employees that pretty much were like, their attitude generally was, well, I don't feel like working too hard today. I could get another job if you fire me. It's no problem. It's just like, seriously. I mean, I treated people okay, but it was one of those things where it's just like, the work still has to get done. But you got a situation where people can get jobs so easily, then it's really sometimes hard to motivate, which is kind of weird. And I'm not sure where I was actually going with that one. Other than I think Mr. Red Taco threw me off when he said no swear words rhyme with lean, because in the back of my mind, I'm looking for a swear word that rhymes with lean. And I can't come up with anything. You could probably work a swear into something that has lean, like something clean. It's like, that's so messed up, it's banana fuddling clean. There we go. There's my attempt at swear words. I'm bad at swear words. But anyway. All right. So we're almost coming up on the end. We got about 14 minutes left. So if you guys got some questions, or if you guys want to talk about anything now, we can certainly move away from the interest rates. It's a Saturday night. It's Easter. Anybody got anything fun planned for this weekend? Like perhaps an egg hunt or something on your yard, or maybe you're going to get dressed up as a rabbit and just hop around the neighborhood to make kids smile. I don't know. So kind of one of those interesting things. Myself, I'm going to do I got my gaming stream tomorrow. And tomorrow's actually a busy day because I got my gaming stream. I also have to write. I have to write and film Monday's video tomorrow. Monday, by the way, is going to be, one of the things we mentioned here today is about blue chip. A lot of my dividend videos lately, we've been looking at the really high, more risky ones. So on Monday's video, we're going to take a step backward and we're going to look at dividend kings. Now, anybody who knows about dividend kings is going to be like, wait a minute, there's no dividend kings in Canada. And that's right. So most of what we're going to be looking at on Monday is going to be American stocks. They're going to be super, super, super safe blue chip. And we're also going to talk about a couple of Canadian stocks too that are on the verge of becoming dividend kings. So that's all coming up on Monday. And what do I have? I have no idea what I have on Thursday. Actually, I think Thursday is, no, I had no idea. We'll figure that out. I've been sort of caught up in all of the stuff that's been happening on the channel in the last couple of days. There's been so much movement, so many new people, that it's been very, very fantastic. So that's kind of, what's the definition of dividend king? So a dividend king is somebody who has been raising their dividend every year for, and I believe it's 50 years. I have to double check the definition for the states because sometimes they're a little bit different. But if you've been increasing your dividend every year for 50 years, you become a dividend king. Now, in Canada, we have two companies that are within about a year. I think one's a year away and the other is 2 years away from becoming dividend kings. But I haven't looked at the dates, so we might actually be a little bit closer than I think. Here's a question I will ask you guys. Let's see who can get this first. Does any of you know who these two are? Let's throw some guesses here, and we'll see who gets it first. So there's two companies in Canada that are on the verge of becoming dividend kings. So this will be up to chat, and whoever guesses it first, well, you'll get a no prize, which is really, well, no prize is no prize, but you'll get bragging rights. That's kind of cool. But anyway, so that there is Monday. I'll be also doing Crypto Night in Canada again this week on Wednesday. So anybody here who is new, I do a show with the Crypto Night in Canada people on the Tim and Nancy Danter channel. If you go into my information below, you'll find all my affiliate links and things like that. So like Wealthsimple, ShakePay. If you want to get signed up with either of those, definitely grab one of those links because that supports the channel. But if you keep going, and Teddy Gator, Can4, no, not Can4, and not Air Canada. Ooh, Air Canada. Now, so I'll give you a hint. These are, I'm Googling and I can't figure it out. I'll tell you what, one of the companies starts with an F and the other one starts with a C. Just to give you a general idea. Now, the one that starts with a C, it's interesting because they're related to another company, but we'll talk about that in a moment. We'll just see if anybody gets it first. So what was I going to say? I was talking about something and then I got all distracted about the Can4. Aha! And that is one of them, Fortis. We have it. So Fortis is one of them. Fortis is a wonderful company. Actually, Fortis is based out of St. John's, Newfoundland. And Nicole, nice. Nicole has come up with the other one. Actually, Canadian Utilities is going to hit it first, and then Fortis will be hitting it second. So yeah, that's awesome. So you guys both have no prizes. You guys are awesome. So they will both be in that video as well because I'm excited about seeing us get a Dividend King. I think it'll be awesome. Google was wrong. Sometimes Google's wrong. It's not that Google's wrong. It's that whoever's page Google found is wrong. And Dave N would guess one of the banks, would guess a bank and an insurance company. And neither of those companies were in the lists I found. But keep in mind, too, sometimes if you're doing it, you have to make sure you do a list search on Canadian. Because if you search just Dividend Kings, you're going to run into all of the American ones. CN must be up there, too. CN, where are they? I'm trying to think where they are on that list. I think, I don't know. I'm not sure, to be honest, if they're an aristocrat or not. I'll have to double check. Because here's the thing, even though your company may be good, all you have to do is if you have 1 year where you don't raise your dividend, you're removed. You're no longer an aristocrat. Simple as that. So it's one of those things that they're pretty strict on it. But here's one of the nice things, and this is one of the reasons that when you have an aristocrat or a Dividend King, one of the reasons that they are awesome for blue chip is that that's a company that is very proud of the fact that they are in that position, that they can brag about that. So a lot of times, even when they have issues, they will still raise that dividend because they don't want to lose that spot. Not to say that that's a good thing, having issues. Of course, it's not. But you still want to kind of, it's still nice to know that if they have just one bad year, they're still going to raise that dividend, even if they make themselves up next year. Now, Fortis is definitely, when it comes to blue chip energy sector, Fortis is pretty much the first company I always think of. They're very, very diversified in what they're doing. They've got a sector that they're moving into renewables. They've also are well diversified right across North America. So definitely a very, very strong company. And that's one of the things with this video that I'm doing for Monday. Normally I give you the stats. It's like, okay, here's some of the fundamentals on the company, but I'll talk a little bit more about each of these companies. And just because I think these are all going to be very interesting companies. So it'll be kind of, I think, definitely good. And I know Joel had mentioned RBC. No. And that's what I did. I put Dividend Kings and got all these companies with F and C in them. Oh, fun. Well, keep in mind too, because they're not officially, because Fortis and Canadian Utilities are not officially dividend kings yet. If you did it, you'd almost have to do a search on dividend aristocrats and get a list of the dividend aristocrats, and then sort them by how long they've been dividend aristocrats to see where they're at. Oh, so they can't have, no, they have to raise it every year. So if your dividend was $2 a share and next year it was $2 a share, you're no longer an aristocrat. Now, there's no limit to how low. Like if you raised it from $2 to $2.01, that's fine. You're still an aristocrat. So you don't lose it. So it's not like there's a certain percentage that you have to do it by, but it has to at least raise. So there has to be, now I don't think I've ever seen a situation where somebody has been like, just to stay in aristocrats, where they've taken their dividend from, let's say, 10 cents and turned it to 10.1 cent. I mean, technically that would still count, but I don't think anybody's been that cheap when it comes to the aristocrats. And when you look at that, if you Google aristocrats and you start looking at some of these companies, you'll see that there's a lot of really, really good blue chip type names. And these are the type of companies that, when the market does start to falter, these are the type of companies you want to be holding. So when you start to feel uneasy with the more risky things that we tend to invest in sometimes, during good times when the market's strong, a lot of these, Mr. Red Tackle, I don't know if there's a minimum, but I imagine 1 cent is probably, I would say, unofficially would be a minimum, but I would have to double check that. I honestly don't know if you could just raise it by a fraction of a cent. But keep in mind, if you're a very small company, your chances are of you maintaining an aristocrat would be very, very slim. A penny is still up from zero. Yeah, it is. Oh, hey, Zab, nice to see you. Now, Zab is somebody brand new. I don't recognize Zab, so always love seeing new faces. That's kind of cool. I'm going to assume Zab is one of the new folks that joined the community through this week, which is awesome because there's been a whole bunch of people. And that's I was hoping I'd see at least one of them in chat, which is awesome. A lot of times too, I know myself, anytime I've joined a new community, first time I'll go to a live chat and I'm not going to say too much. I'm just going to listen, get the lay of the land, and find out what the people are like in there before I start piping in. And yeah, so Zab is new. Well, welcome aboard, Zab. It's always great to have people and new folks in. So that is kind of cool. All right, guys, we got about 2 minutes left. And look out this week. This week I should have that community tab. So I'd like to start doing just some little polls and things like that. Like type of polls I might do is I might do some silly ones because they're fun. But every so often as well, we can throw in a poll about, here are a couple of topics. Which one would you prefer me to do a video on? That type of thing. Because, I look at it this way. The channel may be Mountain Finance, but the channel belongs to all you guys. I just come in, I check the door, I do the work, and bring you what you guys want. So that's kind of that thing here too. And anybody here who is not yet on that Facebook group, so Mountain Finance over on Facebook, it's a private group. Just apply to join. I'll either myself or one of the mods will okay you right away. It'll probably be me because I think, two of my mods are on their way to Florida right now, so I don't think they're going to answer anything. But one of the best things about the Facebook group is you can come in there, you can ask questions, things like that. I will endeavor to answer them, or if I don't, somebody in the community will. But normally it's me because I'm usually on the ball that way. So it's just a great way, and I always like it that way too because when somebody has a question, usually the person who asks the question is not the only person who's thinking of that question. Usually there's a few people in the community who are like, oh, I wonder how that works, but they just don't want to ask for, maybe people might think that they're, oh, people might think I should already know that, but I think a teacher once said to me, the only dumb question is the one that's not asked. Well, that's not entirely true. I've heard some really dumb questions, but in this case, when it comes to learning, that is absolutely 100% true. All right. And Dave said, this is interesting about the raise every year. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's going to be kind of cool. And I'll definitely touch on that on the video. So we'll be back at this again next week. So it'd be interesting to hear too, any of you over on the Facebook page, just let me know. Maybe I'll do a poll once I have the community tab. It should be any day now. How you guys are liking this new shorter little format, more news kind of related. Eventually I will probably do this and then bring in the occasional guest, because I kind of miss that myself a little bit, because when I have a guest here, it's like it's not like there's a pause like when I take a drink. Although I was watching this other streamer, and every time they had to take a drink or something, they hit a little button and it played an ad, saying, if you like this, be sure to like and subscribe and all of that. So has there been any new dividend aristocrats in Canada in 2022 so far? That's a really good question. And I do not know right now, but I will find out, and I will put it in the next video. So Monday. So I will just add that for you, Zab, because that would be that's a really good question. It also comes down to whether or not they've released that information yet too. I know I was looking at it before the beginning of this year, and I know there was one company that I think was being booted out of the aristocrats. I think it was an oil company that just didn't raise their dividend, and so they were being thrown out. But anyway, I will include that in. Everybody, thank you very much for coming. It's been fantastic seeing you all, and huge welcome once again to Zab. Nice to see new people. All right, everybody, I will see you guys next week, and of course in the videos this week. And we'll see what happens this week. All right, everybody.